Hello, it's Francesca again with another video. Once I banged the table that the camera's on. I'm gonna do a tarot VR today, hashtag tarot extremes. And I believe it was Marlena Teresa who started it, and I've watched a couple of the VR. It seems like a really interesting way to look at your tarot decks and to compare them and to learn from them that way. I think it would also be interesting to take the idea of the tarot extremes and maybe the prompts and just kind of compare, if you have a small collection, to look at your deck, a deck or a couple of decks, and look at them in that way, the extremes, the the ends of different continuums. So I'm going to switch the camera and we'll start with the prompts. One moment. Okay, so the first prompt in this is minimalist versus maximalist. And for my minimalist, I'm choosing the Ninth Dimension Tarot, which is an older tarot deck from the 1970s, from 1971. And I've shown this on my channel before. A friend of mine gave it to me. It was her grandmother's. And it has these kind of primitive line drawings on it, and then just bands of color to denote the elements, I guess. The star. I really like this. I haven't used it a lot, but part of the reason I like it is it still retains a lot of its symbolism. I love the cups because it just looks like, a lot of them look like somebody's cup collection that they bought at a yard sale or something. As you can see, it's a pip deck. You know, these unusual different cups, coffee mugs, I guess. I like the pentacles too, the way each one is different, like a button collection. I think that for the most part, a lot of these images incorporate a lemniscate. Let's see, there's the lemniscate, the infinity symbol, swords. There's a Hierophant looking very important. The High Priestess. Yeah, I really like this deck, the simplicity of the images. The voyeurism of the backs makes me laugh too. For the Maximalist, I chose another old antique deck that I have called the Tarot Esoterico. There's more down here, but I can't read it. And this is an older Hermetic deck. And as you can see, it has everything on here. It has got, let's see, this must be the Page of Swords, I think. The Hebrew, it's got the spade up here. I think this would be I'm not sure what that stands for. Maybe it's a J for a jack. Some keywords. Then all this decoration. It's just filled with all this kind of Nouveau art decoration. The majors have some Hebrew letters, and I don't know what that is. If it's supposed to be astrological, I don't know what that symbol is. So some astrological down here, another symbol, keywords. I don't really read Italian very well, and the lettering is so ornate that I can't always make out the words. And the unusual thing, this one, this must be the King, King of Spades. Here we have some astrological, the dates of Libra, some Hebrew letters. I don't know what the plus minus is. Oh, okay, so spade and then K for king, I'm guessing. And if you're wondering what this number is up here, each card in the deck has a unique number, 1 through 78. Maybe it's 0 through 78, but I think it's 1 through 78. Oh, I guess it would be 0 through 77, which is, I haven't seen that on any other deck. And I have not really used this deck a lot. It's hard to shuffle. It's hard to look at. I don't like this type of over-sexualized, kind of body beautiful images that you see in a lot of Italian decks. Tower. I don't know what this number is either. Yeah, I kind of wish I had a book to this, but I haven't seen it. It didn't come with it. So that's my Maximalist, the Tarocco Esoterico. From, I'm guessing, the 70s. Well, let's put these side by side. So this tag, Tarot to the Extremes, is from Marlena Teresa. And that's one of the things she did was put her extreme deck side by side and see how they stack up. These are so different. They are so different. They barely are recognizable as two tarot decks next to each other. Cool. The next prompt is daytime versus nighttime, and I have Tarot of the Master in a homemade box for daytime and the Wild Unknown for nighttime. So Tarot of the Master is a pre-Rider-Waite-Smith deck, or a reprint of a pre-Rider-Waite-Smith deck from, it's Italian. And I just feel like the whole atmosphere takes place on a feast day or something in some lovely seaside town in Italy. Even the, oh my God, this is kind of a gory picture, but the ribbons make it a little festive. I feel like the backgrounds are all kind of during the day. One of those swords. Even the star seems to be in the middle of the day, the flowers. It's like some beautiful summer festival is happening here all day. I like the kind of, they're not, I wouldn't say this is pastel-y, but the colors are natural, they're bright. So festive. And then for nighttime, the Wild Unknown, I feel like this seems to take place at night. A lot of the cards have this dark background. I love this deck. It's been getting a lot of unlove lately, but I used to use it as my main deck, and I found it a little bit hard to really get into. I think I used it for like a year or two, but I've always loved it. But there's such a kind of dark inked background on almost all these cards that make me feel like it's at night rather than during the day. Even there's a sun in here and a lion, but there's like this darkness, this nighttime, or maybe the dark primeval forest or something. Hierophant. Must be the 10 of Cups. This reminds me of stage lights just lighting up one area of a dark stage. Mother of Pentacles. So let's put these side by side. So we have like a dark forest atmosphere and a brightly colored Italian festival atmosphere. These seem so far away from each other as well, I think. You know, here's the star for each of them. If these were completely out of context, I wouldn't even recognize them as part of a tarot, each of them as part of tarot. part of the same idea. So this would be the Queen of Pentacles, and this would be the King of Pentacles, I guess. And they're not in order at all. The feeling of these decks are so different to me. But that is the idea behind the tag, Tarot to the Extreme. I made this box. I'm pretty proud of it, although the bottom part is a little bit too small for the top part, which is why there's this velvet ribbon. It looks classy though. The next prompt is best shuffle versus worst shuffle. And for the best shuffle, I pulled out a tin in the deck. A deck and a tin. I have a few of these decks in a tin, and because they're small and the cardstock is pretty flexible, I find these really really easy to shuffle. I shuffled this last night and managed to get half of them in reverse order. Oops. And by really easy, I mean easy for me. I don't actually have an easy time shuffling at all. Oops. I should have pulled out my Morgan Greer. That's older and I've used it a lot. So any tin deck is going to be an easier shuffle than, say, an indie deck like the Dark Mansion, another favorite of mine. But the cards are fairly big. I guess they're pretty standard. But they're thick. They're thick. And there's a kind of stickiness to the cards. Both sides. I don't know what that's called. And I'm not sure if it's the cardstock or finish. And if I use enough, will it wear off? I don't know. But I don't even try to shuffle this whole. I might divide it up into 2 or 3 stacks and shuffle each one. But I cannot shuffle this whole. I can do a little hand over hand if I'm careful. But this deck is my hardest to shuffle. And then the tin decks are my easiest. And the next one is Confronting versus Comforting. So my Confronting is Wheel of Change Tarot, which I picked up a long time ago. I have not really seen it around TarotTube or other people talking about it online. So I don't know how wide it was distributed. I can't remember when it was put out or copyrighted because I trimmed it. So the reason I find this confronting is it borrows from a lot of different cultures and ways of thinking. This looks kind of Sumerian, I guess. And the Queen of Swords has this Japanese scene. Is this Hawaiian, maybe? Indigenous? Scenes from Africa, or of African culture. The Magician looks, I'm not sure. It has a really good book, so it's definitely I can definitely explore this more. But part of the reason I find it confronting is because as I look at these images, I sort of congratulate in my mind the creator for creating for using these cultures and these other ideas in such a respectful way. From borrowing in a respectful way. But then I think to myself, how do I know? I'm not part of any of these cultures. I don't know anything about any of these cultures. I don't know anyone from any of these cultures. I live in a very white part of my country. I'm from another very white part of my country, United States, you can't tell. So I don't know if these are respectful or if they lean more towards cultural appropriation. American Indigenous. For instance, I don't know. Now, you can't lump every American indigenous culture together into one homogenous group. There are a lot of very different groups, and they historically had very different ideas, but also clothing and decoration. So here we have a man standing dressed in a certain way. And then we have a totem pole over here and the ocean over here. And do these all go together? Does this image or this depiction go with the pipe? And does those go with the pole, with this, the ceremony that he's doing? I don't know. I would have to read the book. But I do like this deck. I feel like a lot of thought went into it. I also feel like there's a lot of symbolism in there. I like the lovers. Whenever I look at a deck, I want to see what the lovers are before I purchase it, because what I want from the lovers card is egalitarian, equality, and equity. I feel like that really brings it in. This image brings it in. Both of them have the same level of being dressed versus undressed. They're androgynous. As you can, they have the light and the dark. This is a very symmetrical image, and it evokes that idea of egalitarianism that I like to see in a lover's card. The RWS does the same for me. Kind of like that dress. So that's my most confronting. And my most comforting is the Spacious Tarot, who is by Carrie Mellon and Annie Reiget. And it's an animal deck, or I guess to say nature deck. And I just find the simplicity and the naturalness or the based in nature idea of the cards really soothing. I don't use this to read. I didn't even buy it when I bought it. I knew I wouldn't read with it. I mostly use it for meditation. I love this card for the Fool because you put yourself in it. This is your journey. I like the way on the pentacles, this one's hard to see, but she has, similar to the first one I showed you, each pentacle is a little bit different, like, someone's button box, where you can never find more than 2 or 3 of the same button. Here you can kind of see how each pentacle is pretty different. So that's my most comforting deck, the Spacious deck. Let's put these side by side. I feel like these have a little more in common than the previous pairings because there's so much outdoors in both decks, and they're very similar in size. They have this feeling of being outside, in nature, and of nature. But I don't know if I would use them together. I don't typically use 2 different decks together, except in 1 or 2 instances, because they are hard to look at together. The Wheel of Change has so much busyness, so much detail in each card, so much movement in each card, and this one's just more calm. So the next prompt is every day versus every so often. Here we have some duplicates. Every day is Rider-Waite-Smith. Use it a lot. I have a few renditions, including this one. And the one I mostly use is the Centennial deck, the Centennial Rider-Waite. This is a problem, having all these reversals in here. That's every day. If I'm going to just do a reading in the morning or spontaneous, I'll grab my Rider-Waite-Smith. I've used it for so long. I feel like I just know it so well. Although I have to say, even after such a long time of reading, every now and again I'll look at a card and notice something in there that I hadn't noticed before. Like this crown in the Intemperance. I have been reading for over 20 years before I saw that. It's not even subtle in there. It's right there. So my everyday is the Rider-Waite-Smith in some form. I also use the Morgan Greer quite a lot. And then every so often is the Spacious Tarot. As I said before, I just use it mainly for meditation. Part of the reason I use it just for meditation instead of reading is I feel like a lot of the symbolism has been taken out of it. And while there's symbolic meaning, actually this is a pretty good symbol for death to have. For instance, the High Priestess is gorgeous. And there's the moon, which has symbolic meaning. There's the shell and the water and the sand, and those, have kind of a symbolic meaning. But for the most part, the symbolism of the High Priestess is no longer here. The book is not here. The two pillars are not here. We have the moon, that's there. I think there's does she wear a veil? Anyway, a lot of the symbolism is no longer here. But it's still a good deck for meditation or just for looking for something else or to deepen your understanding and the meaning of the High Priestess for you in your reading. But that's my every so often. Overrated versus underrated, which is always going to be controversial because an overrated deck is going to be a much loved deck, isn't it? Otherwise it wouldn't be overrated. But I'll start with underrated, and this is my Jonathan D deck. These are the backs. It's a Marseille type deck. Although when I started to learn Marseille, I decided to buy an actual Marseille deck because this is pretty different than a regular Marseille deck. I like the illustrative quality of it, the kind of woodcut quality of it. I used to use it a lot for client readings because the pictures are pretty simple and a client wouldn't read. Sometimes clients will overthink a scenic pip card. But with these pips, non-scenic pips, they won't overthink it too much. So this comes with, if you buy it new or online, and I think it's pretty available, it comes with a book. And I feel like I had the book once upon a time, but I can't find it. And I've purged and gone through my books so much over the last year or so that I don't think I have it. Overrated is Sassurbaito deck by Stasia Burrington. Now this is a much loved deck and it's much loved by me. And I use it. But I find that a lot of the symbolism has been taken out of it. And lately that has bothered me a lot. I don't know if we can get to the Emperor. The Fool. So for instance, the Fool he's a crazy old man and we can get a story from it, but it's a portrait. The King of Cups is a portrait of a gentleman pouring coffee. The Knight of Cups is a portrait. I think in the RWS there's a lemniscate above the Strength card, so we don't have that here. And while the images, there are certain things that have symbolic meaning, swords have some symbolic meaning, the symbolism has been stripped, much of the symbolism has been stripped away. I wonder if I can come up to the Emperor. Like the Chariot. There's usually a lot of various symbols within the Chariot card that aren't here. It's an illustration of a horse, perhaps in distress. Death as well. I mean, death, if you just lay down the word death, there's meaning behind it. So there's meaning behind her image, but the symbolism is no longer there. I'm going to try and find it. The Emperor. It's a portrait, and it's an amazing portrait. I think it's great. I just think this deck is overrated. But I love it. I still love it. The star is a picture of an astronaut. So I find it hard to get meaning from these illustrations that I don't already have, that I have not already found from other decks and previous study of the Rider-Waite-Smith or Marseille or what have you. So that's the Overrated deck. Oh, we want to put them side by side. Very different, but they both have an illustrative quality that I really like in these decks. It's so funny. I watched Marlena Teresa's original tagged video, and all of her decks paired so nicely. Mine seem to have nothing to do with each other at all. But I love them both, or love them all, really. I'm trying not to keep decks that I don't love or won't use or don't have some meaning to me, for me. The last one is light work versus shadow work. For light work, I chose the Marseille deck. I think I could have just as easily chosen the RWS, and the reason is because I consider this a balanced, neutral deck. That said, the backgrounds of this particular deck are all white, which gives a certain brightness and lightness to the deck. And the colors are very bright. They're all primary colors or secondary colors. This particular Marseille deck is very clear. The outlines are nice and black. The colors are within the lines. They're not offset like a lot of Marseille decks are. The figures are all fairly neutral, or androgynous, I guess. Has this old-timey lovers card with the 3 figures instead of just 2 figures. La force, l'étoile, or l'étoile. This one's in order because I've been studying it. So this is what I would use for light work once I get to really know it. I don't really know the Marseille system very well yet. And for shadow work, a very obvious choice is the Dark Mansion. I keep calling it the Haunted Mansion because there's an old TV show called The Haunted Mansion about vampires. And I love that show. So as you can see, it's really got a dark feel to it. But what I like about it is it seems to have, it's witty. It has a sense of humor to it. With the exaggeration, the kind of, the buildings here are a little bit crooked. It seems to take place in a crazy mansion and a bizarre town. I mean, any place that there's a Ferris wheel has, in my mind, some nefarious feeling to it. Like this image has such a dark, seems to have kind of dark overtones and undertones. But the exaggeration of the horse's mane and neck just strikes me as humorous. Is he a villain? He's got this pentacle tucked under his cloak very in a shady way. Let's put these together. Now these I might actually use together. The only thing I do with 2 decks is an exercise where I'll ask one deck, what is my question? And the other deck, what is the answer to that question? So for instance, I might pull a card from the Marseille saying, okay, what are we talking about? Wheel of Fortune, what's going awry or what's going up and down in my life? And the answer would be something to do with the Page of Cups. that's pretty much the only way I use 2 decks together. But this, I think, would work. This pairing would work pretty well, because I like them to be pretty different decks. I kind of like the way these two go together. The way the Marseille is so traditional and the Dark Mansion is so contemporary. All right. So that is my Tarot to the Extremes VR to Marlena Teresa. I think she pronounces it Marlena. I hope I'm right. Seems like it should be that way. And I hope you enjoyed this, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you, and have a fantabulous day. Bye.